Hey babes, let's start with a mildly spicy opinion. Fanfiction is a great outlet for creatives within fanbases, and it shouldn't be considered the shameful hobby that many perceive it as. That being said, I, the hypocrite I am, refuse to tell many people that I went through a fanfiction phase from middle school to early high school. Something about the connotations, you know? What I'm trying to get at, though, is that fanfiction, or even fan art, fan theories, and overall fan perception of characters are often tainted by decanonization. Decanonization being the way fans will pull a character's personality and actions away from canon, creating an OOC version of them that the viewers prefer. On an individual level, this really doesn't mean much, but some characters have been decanonized by not only individual fans, but the fanbase as a whole. And while the act itself is arguably harmless, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that decanonization, which is rooted in projection, can often lead to disappointment. One of the most popular types of decanonization comes in the form of making a character seem more dominant and cold than they actually are. And I don't want to get into the origins of this mass projection or the societal reasons that so many young women fetishize this type of character. We'd be here all day. But if you've ever read fanfic, think back. Have you ever read something where a character was much more dominant than in canon? Society has urged young women, who make up a large chunk of many fanbases, to idealize this type of romantic partner, which is why this type of projection and decanonization usually happens to the main love interest and on such a large scale. And while I'm already here discussing romantic relationships in the heteronormative sense, I could say the same thing for the decanonization of the female protagonists, or even popular female characters. They're usually perceived as weaker and more submissive than in canon. They're more emotional, but with less nuance. Like, it's hard to take a specific example, but you can name nearly any popular hetero ship, and I guarantee half the fanfics and fan art have some cringy power imbalance where the female character is suddenly a damsel and the male character is like pushing her up against a wall or something. So let's review. Decanonization is most powerful when the majority of the fanbase does it, and it's quite indicative of larger societal issues, demonstrated by the ways in which fans project their own inherited desires onto the characters and their dynamics. But is it possible for decanonization to be a good thing? Well, this is tricky, because while pulling characters away from canon in order to perceive them in a more positive light may seem beneficial, it can actually sweep the original intent of the character right under the rug. Like, I remember during the height of She-Ra Season 4, there was fan art of Catra being a goofball catgirl, haha. And while I think it's important to keep these memes alive, and I am in no way judging Catra stans, I think fans created a much more innocent version of Catra in their heads that allowed them to brush over all that, sexy war crime. And I think this undermined a lot of what Noelle Stevenson was trying to comment on in terms of redemption happening just when you think it's too late. In this way, shows like Infinity Train, with smaller fan bases that produced far less fan talk and fan theory, don't have the room for such mass decanonization, whereas shows like She-Ra do. Grace was a character whose redemption felt more uncertain, because while fans decided early on that Catra was #allgood, they never made the same assumption about Grace due to Infinity Train having overall less hype. And this led to Grace's redemption feeling more in the moment rather than the fulfillment of a path already laid out. And I'm in no way trying to shit on Catra's redemption, because I think it had a lot of good parts. But I do think that She-Ra is proof that if a show gets popular enough, the fans end up holding an amount of power that rivals the creators themselves. And no, I'm not equating this to pandering, which I feel people use more often than not as a way to fight against any sort of social progress in media. That's what all the people who call Bumblebee pandering to cover their homophobia, I see you. But actually, if we talk about RWBY, there's a great example of decanonization in here. It's safe to say that all viewers interpret Adam differently. I think a large chunk of Adam's decanonization stems from Rooster Teeth's inability to talk about social justice issues with any ounce of, ability to do so. I mean, we have mostly white people writing an allegory for racism, so it's no surprise that most of the White Fang storyline, Adam included, is a big yikes. RWBY belongs to a giant list of shows that pull the same harmful narrative of, but what if the oppressed group didn't want equality, but instead they wanted to take over and make us oppressed? And when I say this propaganda has no shortage, I mean I've seen it on The Amazing World of Gumball, Young Justice, Legend of Korra, so on, so on, so on. So I can see why a lot of fans would decanonize Adam, because canon Adam is written like insensitive hot garbage. But the way the writers have positioned Adam as an abuser, and directly relating this to his position as the head of a resistance group, well, it's bound to be bad. So we have fans who focus on who Adam is. We have fans who focus on who Adam could have been. We have fans who are literally everywhere in between. So while decanonizing Adam into a more accurate portrayal of a real-world revolutionary can be dangerous, the writers are the ones to blame for leaving these holes for the viewers to fill in. I hate Adam's writing more than the character himself, who is meant to exist without nuance. So in this case, Do we just take him as he's written? If we try to decanonize him, won't that only make his death seem so much more damaging? To be honest, I can't address all of RWBY's problems in a fraction of the video, but TLDR, a lot of fans decanonize Adam for valid reasons, but because of his writing, this only leads to more disappointment. Decanonizing characters can range from making fan art of Sasuke being jovial, to making uwu baby memes about objectively bad people, to full-on rewriting the script of an abuser because his character was written poorly. And this only makes me respect the people who used to tag their fanfictions as OOC whenever they made a character who was too emotional, suddenly cry Niagara Falls, or take a character with a stick up their ass and write them as a jokester. But there's a self-awareness in there that I respect. But, like I said, when the line between fan theory and canon gets too blurry, fans will only be disappointed. Disappointed that Adam dies a villain. Disappointed that their best girl isn't loved by all. Disappointed that those two characters, who they swear have more chemistry in all those fanfictions and fan art, didn't actually get together at the end of the show. This happens a lot, so much that it's hard for me to tackle each example when this is just an overall phenomenon. But it just amazes me so much. I'm sure there's a deeper psychological reasoning behind this, but I don't know it. Any hoozles, I'm interested in knowing people's experience with decanonization or a character they tend to interpret in a different sense than in canon. For me, my guilty decanonization, which I guess can be written off as headcanon or whatever, is that Tenten is actually one of the most skilled ninja in Naruto. My problematic reasoning used to be rooted in very much sexism and the inability to comprehend that there is not one scene in the show with Tenten that couldn't have been written out. Anyway, stand Tenten.